In the previous video, we started a series where we are taking simple in concept ideas and we're converting them from tutorial code into actually working pieces of code that are production ready and that resemble something you'd see in a real world application. So, as always, we're going to start by creating our source folder. And our source folder will be the container of all our application code. Uh, so today we're going to be creating two more folders inside of the source code. One is the lib folder. Lib stands for library, and we're going to be modularizing our code and all the supporting pieces of code that we need for our main uh, application to work will be stored in the lib folder. Then we have the utils folder, which are like pieces of code that will make it easier for us to work. Uh, you might know, you might have experience working with uh, code like packages, and all the packages that we are going to write for ourselves will be stored here. The code stored inside the utils folder will not be necessary for our application to work. We could write the code ourselves, but this will be just a way of making our code cleaner and making it uh, easier to read. So let's start. In the source folder, I'm gonna create a main.py folder. This main.py folder is where we're gonna be starting to work, and this is the entry point of our application. So as always, we're gonna be creating a function called main, and we're gonna be calling that function. The reason we're doing this is because we want our code to be modular, and it's generally a best practice not to just write directly in a plain Python 5. So let's continue. The first thing we want to do is we want to set up our projects, right? So I'm gonna be creating a separate file for that. I'm gonna be calling that file setup.py. And this setup.py is basically where we're gonna be storing our application setup. For the code, for the game to start, we need some default values and we need some starting setup, and we're going to be storing that here. I'm going to be creating a function called setup just to make it exportable. And let's start. The first thing is we want the user to be able to select a range. For example, we want the user to be able to start from 0 all the way to 10, right? If the user wants this, if the user wants the guessing game to be from 0 to 10, he needs to import it, explicitly mention that. So we're going to be basically doing that. We're going to be giving the user the ability to set up his range. And let's say ranges and say game range. Now we have to create this game range inside the lib folder again. Game range.py. We have to import it, right? So import game from, actually say from game range, import game range. And we have to create the function here to import the definition, game range. Now, now that we have the game range, we have to write the logic. So first of all, we have two values, starting range and the ending range. For these values, we want to ask the user to input them, right? So we're going to say starting range equals uh, input, choose the starting range and the ending range too. input, choose the ending range. Now there is a problem here, that is this input will return a string, but we want numbers because we're going to be doing some comparisons, uh, a bit of like manipulation, so we want it in number. So easily we can do this, say like this, we can say int, and this will convert it. But we would have to come here and do this here too. And as you can see, this code is a bit messy. We don't want to do this every time we want to accept a number. So what I like to do is we're going to be creating a utility function called number input. Actually, let's rename this number input apply, and say number input. So how does the number input work? First, we're gonna take a command, which is here. It is this part here. Choose the starting range. This is the command. So it will accept the user inputs, right? So input equals uh, inputs, and we're gonna say command here. We're gonna pass it. So since this is a variable and this is a function or a definition or a method, we can just use the name here too. Then after that, after we take the input, what we want to do is we want to format it. So the format, let's say formatted input. That's the input. We take the input and we just change it to an integer, right? So int. So here we are taking the input and we're formatting it to be an integer. Then we just simply have to return the formatted input. So now we have a number input, right? So what you have to do is we create a util, sorry, an init.py file. This file will be holding all our imports. So anytime we want to reference this number input and get it into our code, we don't need to import it directly. We just import it from the utils folder using the init file. Uh, Basically say from dot number input import number input. So now here in our game range, we can just import it from utils. We can say from utils and say import number input, and we already have it here. Now instead of asking for this, we just say number input, and here we go. So this will return the user's input in a form of number instead of string. Uh, what's next? So one problem that we might have faced is that the user might enter a starting range which is less than that, which is greater than the ending range. So we don't want that because you want the starting range to be small and the ending range to be big. So to combat that, what we can do is we can start a loop, a while loop, which will run as long as the user is inputting an incorrect result, right? So you can say if the starting range is less than the ending range, we break this loop, meaning we already got our value and we're done. But if not, we just continue. We say print, we have to say your starting range should be greater than your ending range. Sorry, your starting range should be less than your ending range. Now the user will be prompted each time this fails, each time the starting range is not less than the ending range, the user will be prompted to do this to import a starting range which is lower than the ending range, and this will just continue. And for our game to start, remember, uh, we this is just the game range .py file, meaning we are using this to just set up the range, so we have to return the range. And we return it in the form of a dictionary and say starting range. We're exporting this and this ending range. So now that we have exported these two, we can go to the setup and we can use that. So so the setup is pretty simple, right? First we need our starting range, which is from the ranges here. Just take starting range and the ending range equals ending range. Okay, let's move this ranges. So we have our starting and ending ranges. Then we need the correct number. The correct number is just what the user is trying to guess. And we're going to be using the random library in Python to do this. So import random. And it's simple. We say random dot rand range. This will give us the ability to select a random number from a range of uh, numbers, right? From starting point to an ending point. And as you might have guessed, it's from the starting range to the ending range. So this means we're going to be creating a random number and assigning it the correct value, which the random number will be from the including the starting range and ending range, meaning the user has the ability to customize this as the game starts. So one last thing in the game setup is the guess count. So the user's score will be determined on how many guesses it took him or her to finish this. So based on the guesses, this will be incremented. So we just have to return this from the setup file. So again, starting range, same as starting range, ending range, ending range, correct number, correct number, and guess count will simply be guess count. So now that we have this set up, means our game is ready to go and we should be able to just start uh, working on the actual logic of the game. So the first thing we want to do is we want to apply this setup, right? So in order to apply this setup, we have to apply it here in the main. So simply we are exporting this, right? So we need to export this. So init.py again. We have discussed the use of init.py. It's just to export. It's just to export from a folder and not directly. That makes our code just clean. Uh, and say from dot setup import setup. So now we can come here in the main and from lib we import setup. So now in the main.py file, what we have to do is say setup values equals setup. Of course, it's a definition, so we have to call it here. So now we extract the setup values. Starting range is the setup values. Starting range. The ending range is the same. Setup range, correct number, and finally the guess count. And you might be asking, why do we need all these values? Uh, Simply, we are gonna feed these values into the game, the actual game logic, and that is something we have to write now. So we need to create a file called game.py, which will be the housing of the game logic. So the game, and here we go. So first of all, let's add this to our exports. So from dot game import game. So let's close these. So what is the game logic? So the game logic is pretty simple. Uh, it will take the starting range, the ending range, the correct number, and the guess count. So using this, the game will run a loop, a while loop, and this simply will run as long as the user is not correct. So when the user gets the correct value, the while loop will be broken and the user will have his score or result. So it's a very simple uh, concept and a very simple implementation. First, we need to take the user's guess, and we're going to be doing that from an external uh, module called instructions, right? Instructions. This will be another one. There's instructions dot py benefits instructions. So, what does the instruction do? The instruction is very simple. Uh, so it will only be taking a guess number and it will be asking the user to provide a guess. Let me show you. In practice, this is very simple. Just need the number inputs, which if you remember, we have to import it from the utils, import number inputs. So we have to ask the user. We're going to be using a string concatenated literals here in Python. So you say guess a number from starting range to ending range, right? So we don't have these and we're going to be needing them, so we're going to be accepting them as parameters. Since in the game we already have access, we can pass them here. So instructions we actually need to import them. So from dot instructions import instructions. So now we are prompting the user to guess a number from a starting point to an ending point. But we don't want to be giving the user this message every time. Instead, what we want to do is we want to give him this message at the first try, and at the tries preceding that, we want to actually prompt the user with a different prompt. So if the guess number if the guess count equals 1, we need the guess count here actually. Uh, let's do it here. Guess count, and we have to pass it here. So this method, by the way, is called dependency injection, where we break our code into modules that do specifically one thing, and that makes it easier to test and also to configure. So we are passing uh, guess count from the main to the game and from the game to the instructions. So now we have that. Actually, this gotta be two equal signs, right? Then let's save this. Then we have our guess number. We are prompting the user like this. In the first guess count, so guess count 1 indicates the first try. In the first try, we have to prompt the user like this. But after every try preceding that, we want to do it in a different way. Instead, we want to just say try again. Okay, so if it's not the first try of the user, we want to say try again, which makes it easier and have a better user experience. So finally, we want to return the guess number. So what the user guessed, we want to return it because it's important for the game logic. And we're storing it here since it's returned. And in my experience, you have to make your code as readable as possible, but it's not always simple. So, for example, we're taking a number from instructions here, and that's not readable. So, I'm going to leave a comment. So, I use comments when the code does not describe itself. So, say the user's guess will be provided once instructed. So, it's it's providing a clear connection between the instructions and the guess number. So, user's guess instruction. So you should always make your code readable, and in cases that readability is not possible, you have to make it, uh, you have to comment it. You have to document your code. So I think we are finishing up. Simply, we want to say if the guess number is less than the starting range, or if the guess number is greater than the ending range. So, case guess. So if this is true, meaning if the user, when the user is guessing, if the user is not within the range he set up for himself, then we would have to tell him, right? So we say print f and say, please choose a number from starting range to ending range, right? So we are prompting him here. So if if the user is not, for example, if the user sets the range to be from 0 to 5 and he chooses like 10, that's not correct, and the user will struggle to find an answer because we should presume that the user forgot his range. So when he says 10, he does not remember the range, so he's going outside the boundary. So we have to remind him by saying, please choose a number from the starting range to the ending range, from 0 to 5. So we don't want to continue with the loop in this case. We just want to use the continue keyword, which is just Python for stop running this loop and start again, start over again. Next, if the guess number, what the user guessed, is equal to the correct number, so if the user is correctly, if the user has correctly guessed the number, we have to say print f and say you have correctly guessed the number in guess count tries. Okay, so meaning if the user gets this correct, we have to tell them a score, and the score is how many times have the user guessed to finally get to the correct answer. So we are not actually incrementing the guess count here, right? So we have to do it here. If the user is not correct, we have to say guess count plus equals 1. So every time the user is not correct, we will add 1 to the count of guesses. Every time the user is correct, we will just do this and tell the user that he scored correct. So finally, we have to break here because we don't want the game to run after the user has been correctly the user has correctly guessed. So I think that's all for the logic, except we have to actually include the game from uh, for game. So okay, so here we are for the game. I like to structure my imports in a way that the first imports are the first used, and the latter one are just like that, preceding each other. So I think it's basically just uh, running the game, right? Here, uh, just think of it as we're setting up the game and then we're running the game. So starting range, sorry, ending range, correct number, and guess count. So now that we have set up our game and it should be working perfectly, we have to be able to test it and get the actual good result. So let's try testing it. So I'm just going to open my terminal in VS Code user using here, control backtick, and just say, sorry, not npm JavaScript, Python 3. Uh, we are running it from source folder. We are running the main.py file. So hopefully this works. So we have some sort of uh, error. Okay, so let's check it out. So it seems like it's in the number input. So the input it says that local variable input refers a bit before assignment, and this is happening in line 2 here. So input. Okay, so I'm using different Python versions to test this code, so I might have missed uh, that in this version probably, and we can check the version Python 3. Yeah, 3.10.12. You cannot do this. This is actually very simple to fix. Uh, we can just say user inputs, right? User input here to user input. Okay, so in later versions, I think you can use the inputs as a variable and also as here as a function or definition. So let's try to run it again. Choose, okay, so it's working. Now it tells us to choose a starting point. I'm going to say 0. And it tells us to choose an ending point. Now I'm going to choose -5. So we said that there should be like an error to the user if the user's starting range is greater than the user's ending range. So your starting range should be less than your ending range. Okay, great. So it's working. So 0 and ending range 10. Now we are guessing the number. And another thing we set up is that there should be, let me actually mm, make this bigger. Uh, we told the program to prompt the user to choose from the correct range if he or she steps out of that range. So, for example, if I say 99, please choose a number from 0 to 10. So it's now work. It is working. So let's start 0. Try again. Okay, it's working. 10 maybe. Okay, 9, 8. I'm confident it's 5, 4, 3. I'm terrible at this. 2, 1. 1. It was 1. So you have correctly guessed the number in 9 tries. So as you can see, this is a pretty simple project. So you might see in many videos where that we take this kind of approach, this kind of project, and just make it in one line, in one Python file. We make it very simple and beginner friendly. And if you're a beginner and if you're just starting out in programming, that's what you should be looking for in a video. But this is not for pure beginners. This is for beginners who want to step their game to the next level. So I hope you learn something about maybe about Python syntax, Python keywords, Python libraries, how to modularize your code, in coding in general. I hope you learned a thing or two about dependency injection, which is the method or coding pattern we used where we classify all our files separately here and we just uh, import all the files when we need them. So making our code modular, clean, and easily testable and easily configurable, easily to add features and updates and fixes. So I hope you enjoyed. And before I finish off with this project, with this video, I would like to tell you about a project I've been working on called Deep Search. So what is Deep Search? Deep Search is a tool. It's a website, but it's a tool that helps you find files on your computer based on not based on the actual names of the files, but actually their content. So what you have wrote inside. For example, I have this file here, and I have this file. So maybe I forgot the name of one of those files. I can simply like uh, write this. If I remember I wrote something like this, I could search for this def instructions and it will find that based on the content here. So it's not actually ready currently. So if you want to be an early user, if you want to help me test the tool, and if you want the chance to try and use the tool for free, please go to this here, deepsearch.pi.overzeal.com. I'm gonna leave this link here in the description. So go check it out, and I'll appreciate if you sign up here. Yeah, thanks for watching. I really hope you got something from this video and made you a better developer, programmer. So I'm gonna get you in the next video.